Hey YouTube, Poopslag here, and this is TurboFat, an open source Godot puzzle game I've been working on. The source code's linked below, I'm going to see how it all works. But for the past 2 months, in addition to finishing up the cool credit sequence, which I don't want to spoil yet, I've been getting the game up on Steam, which has been a cool and fun challenge. I've never put anything on Steam before, so just stuff like packaging the game files in the way Steam likes, and getting achievements to work, and things like that. It's all been sort of an uphill journey, but I've finally gotten somewhere with it, so stay tuned and let me tell you what I did. So if you've never put a Godot game on Steam before and it's something you're interested in doing, I followed this really excellent tutorial by Blue Phoenix Games, who goes step by step through all the things you have to download. But the first thing I did was download the Steamworks SDK, and it comes packaged with this Steam Pipe GUI, which when you run it, you can point it to a directory on your computer to say, I want to send these files to Steam as one big bundle, and that's called a depot. And I had two depots, one for Windows and one for Linux. And then once all those files got sent up to Steamworks, Steamworks, if you don't know, is sort of the web application you use to configure how your game is presented to users for things like how it's described and where all your trailer videos are and stuff like that. But it's also how you configure which files they'll run when they play the game. So I configured one of the depots to say this is my Windows depot, and here's the build to use. So if you've uploaded multiple versions, you'll need to say like, oh, this one goes to like the main branch, and here's the executable file to run. And also, if you want your save files to sync across computers using Steam's Cloud Sync stuff, then you would say here's all of the save files. And there's about 20 of them, and they're like 10 megs. It wants those kinds of details. But the point is, there's a lot of little fiddly stuff to configure for each OS. And when I clicked like the button to run TurboFat on Windows, it just worked first try. And I was like, I really didn't expect that to just work. I thought I'd have to do a little bit of troubleshooting or debugging. I had some friends who were running Linux, and I was like, can you test this on Linux and see if the Linux version works? Because surely something will break there. And it worked for them too. I didn't even have to set like the executable flag, which I really thought was going to break there. I thought I would have to like have some utility to like run it in chmod plus x something. It all just magically worked. So I don't know. Maybe I should buy a lottery ticket. That was amazing. So you can just drop a bare bones exe into Steam and it'll work fine, but it won't tie into any of Steam's features. So to get achievements working, I had to do a few extra little steps like installing this Godot Steam plugin, which then lets Godot talk to the Steam APIs. There's a Steam script where you can go in and configure it with things like how to say hello to Steam and how to tell Steam which game is currently running. And then I also added a few extra logging features, so later if I have problems like, oh, this achievement isn't unlocking or something, I can flip this flag and see a whole bunch of output about how it's talking to Steam and what might be going wrong. Lastly, the Godot Steam plugin relies on a few extra DLLs and SO files for Linux systems, so I had to package those into my export scripts. So I created a few achievements in Steam that I wanted to trigger, and then I had a really specific idea for how I wanted this achievement triggering logic to work in my game. What I didn't want to have was like code in the tutorial code to say, when they finish a tutorial, see if this is the last tutorial, then trigger the tutorial achievement or something. I wanted instead to have code that anytime you load or save data, it can just peek at the save data that you just loaded and say, wait a minute, have you finished all the tutorials in your save data? Then yes, then I will activate that achievement. And the reason is now I don't need to have code all throughout my game in different places checking for achievements. It's all just in this one cool place. To make that work, though, there's this one wrinkle with Steam's API, which is when you set an achievement, it isn't activated unless you call store stats. And store stats is a call that goes out to the server, so they don't want you calling it too frequently. So to get around that, what I have is a little utility method which calls is achievement achieved to like check, does the player have this achievement yet? And if not, then it'll continue and call store stats in a little while. It'll call it like a few milliseconds later. That way, it can stack up a whole bunch of achievements at once and just call store stats a single time and not result in a whole bunch of round trips. So to trigger these particular achievements, I made this Steam Achievements Autoload Singleton, which has a bunch of child nodes, and each child node extends from Steam Achievement, which is a generic parent class I made, with a single method, refresh achievement, which children can override. And that overrideable method, the children would say things like, I want to set this stat, or if the player did this thing, I want to set this achievement. And then in game, you can see it all works great. It hooks into Steam, and when the player does something special, it tells Steam, like, unlock that achievement, and it pops up. So with all that Steam stuff out of the way, there was still a lot left I had to do. I wanted to add this credit button on the main menu so you can see all the credits, and I didn't want to launch the fancy end credits, so I made a slightly different version. It's just a boring list of names that scrolls by. And the way you exit it, though, I liked how Slay the Spire did it, so I sort of copied what they did, where when you click or hit a key, it launches a pop-up, and then if you click or hit a key again, then it exits. So to implement this, there's this method handle press event, which gets triggered when you click or hit a key. and then it launches a tween, which pops up, waits, and then pops out. But if that tween has already popped up when you do that, then it exits instead. So this YouTube user stay-at-home dev had an excellent tutorial listing a bunch of steps to take to make your Godot game look more professional on Steam. One of which was getting rid of the default Godot splash screen. So you can see originally my game would show this Godot face and then snap into the loading screen really abruptly. And instead I liked it where it starts out blank and then just sort of fades in. So to make that work, I first got rid of the default boot splash in the game settings and disabled this show image thing. And then I added this fade cover to my loading screen, which starts out opaque and then gradually tweens its modulate property so it fades in. So that same video talked about the amateurish feel if you launch a game and it pops up in a window, which I sort of agree with. So now my game defaults to full screen, and this can be toggled in the options menu. Behind the scenes, you can see how the code works out. It's actually just setting this borderless and maximized property. I like that better than true full screen because I can still click back and forth within Discord and stuff like that. And then there's a little bit of extra code to check what the old position of the window were so that when you toggle the setting back and forth, the window doesn't end up someplace or some size that you didn't expect. So a lot of my UI is either difficult or impossible to navigate using a keyboard or gamepad, and I want to make that a little better. So I did make it so now in the settings menu you can arrow up and switch tabs using the keyboard, and you couldn't do that before. And then I also made it so in like the tall scrolling panels, like in the creature editor, if you arrow down, it'll follow what you currently have selected. And that was actually, the latter was just an easy little toggle that I didn't flip. So I flipped this follow focus toggle across my whole game. So now all that'll work. But the tabbed panel thing was a little trickier. There's actually no support in Godot 3 to make these tab containers navigable with a keyboard. You have to do it by hand. Tim Kreef had a little code snippet, which I loved. So I used that and sort of improved it a little bit, in my opinion, so that now there's this tab input enabler node, which you just hang off of any tab container, and it'll make the parent tab container navigable using a keyboard. And then in practice mode, I finally got around to drawing some graphics for the training buttons, and I think they look pretty cool. They're all themed around different sports, but using food instead of like balls and stuff. So Linux TurboFat players used to have to chmod the executable before running it for the first time. And to work around that, I found this zip exec utility by Ronnie Headland, which he included in his open source game, Galaxy Forces V2. And that utility works great, so now you don't have to chmod the file anymore. So that's it for March and April. I didn't talk about all the stuff I did with the credits, but do know that I've been working really hard on some fun surprises at the end, so I think you'll like it if you finish the game. The game is on Steam now, though, and that's huge. The fact that you can actually like launch it and ties into the achievement system. I was really worried those were going to be some hurdles that I just couldn't overcome at the end. So now that that's gone, it's like, well, all I have to do is clean up what's left in the game, fix some bugs, make the UI better, and that's a big deal to me. Right now, all throughout the game are these big drab gray default Godot buttons, which I think just make the game really unprofessional looking. So I want to clean those up and come up with a really custom, cool, colorful UI. And then there's also like the creature and level editors right now. They're very mouse and keyboard centric. And the level editor even just really doesn't work fully functionally. If you want to add certain features, you have to go in and type in JSON by hand into the JSON editor on the side. I either need to rip that stuff out or I need to clean it up and make the UI pretty and make it usable. So I'll start tackling that stuff next month if you want to tune back in and see what I did. In the meantime, if you want to try out the game, we got this cool Discord community, and you can come try it out and let me know what you think. Otherwise, I'll just see you guys next month, and thanks so much for watching. Take care.